Tonight, on 24, zero enrichment disputes overshadow Araghchi and Bitkoff's Geneva talks. According to the Wall Street Journal, Washington is demanding the dismantling of the Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan facilities and the full handover of uranium in exchange for minimal sanctions relief. The U.S. aircraft carrier Gerald Ford heading towards Israel, coinciding with new efforts in Congress to limit the White House's authority for military action against Iran. Amid the Islamic Republic's efforts to suppress widespread student protests, classes at 10 Iranian universities went virtual.
From Iran International 24 with Fardad Farahzad.
Hello and good evening, Iran International viewers in Iran and worldwide. We have breaking news. Moments ago, Barak Ravid, an Axios reporter, quoted an informed source saying Steve Bitkoff and Jared Kushner expressed disappointment with what they heard from Araghchi in the negotiations on Thursday morning, what they heard on Thursday in the negotiations from Araghchi. Iran-U.S. negotiations resumed in Geneva an hour ago. CNN reports Steve Bitkoff spoke directly with Abbas Araghchi. The first part of today's negotiations, according to reports, had been halted for several hours due to disagreement over zero enrichment. An informed source also told Iran International that the reason for this halt was the American side's insistence on zero enrichment and a handover of all 60% enriched uranium to Washington. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal had written at the start of the negotiations that the American side is expected to ask the Islamic Republic to dismantle 3 main sites in Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan, and for the Islamic Republic to hand over all its enriched uranium. Our colleague Ahmad Samadi joins us from the Swiss side of the negotiations. Ahmad, there's information leaking out here and there about the status of the negotiations. What more do we know?
Yes, well, Fardad, first let me say that Mr. Bitkoff and Araghchi's negotiations, which had started in the second round this evening, about an hour and a half ago, have now ended, and the delegations are leaving the discussion venue. So we didn't really see lengthy talks between the two sides. Because if you count that hour and a half indirectly, with half an hour of that being for carrying messages back and forth from one room to another, we actually saw a series of short discussions in the second round, and unless the talks were direct, which would still be short anyway for such an important issue, and now we'll have to see what news the parties will give to the media in the coming hours Anyway, Abbas Araghchi, the Islamic Republic's foreign minister, usually gives an interview after negotiations, and now it will become clear there what the process is like. And also, we're waiting to see what the American side is going to tell us about these talks. Did they move towards progress, or will that news that Irna reported today, that if it fails, both sides will go to war, will that happen or not? But what can be pointed out about today's discussions was that anyway, both sides had come to Geneva once again, emphasizing their positions, which were already clear beforehand. Although the Islamic Republic had announced that it would present an attractive package, well, we saw that the news that was announced showed the American side isn't in agreement, and the most important discussion is, the issue of uranium enrichment in Iran, which, well, the Islamic Republic was definitely looking to have enrichment at the 3.67% level, which, is usually used for power plant fuel, and also, well, some scientific work. But, well, the United States' insistence was that enrichment must be zero. One of the diplomatic sources told us this, and also the discussion about the removal of 60% uranium from Iran, which again, the Islamic Republic had proposed transferring half of it to Russia, and the other half, over a long period, probably I think 2 years, under the supervision of the International Atomic Energy Agency, would be diluted to 20%, and the United States hadn't accepted this either. And Mr. Bitkoff's emphasis has been that all of Iran's more than 440 kilograms of 60% uranium must be handed over to the United States, and well, this was a red line in the Islamic Republic. The Islamic Republic seems unlikely to accept this. Issue means that Ali Khamenei will empty his hand, and by giving away all his uranium, in a way, he won't be able to maintain his leverage anyway. I mean, we have to wait and see in the coming minutes if Ali Khamenei has accepted, given that his own existence and his regime are at risk, or if not, he has insisted on his positions. We may witness conflict between Iran and the US. And, well, regarding other issues, it doesn't seem like we can really talk about them. Anyway, these were the most important issues that were raised in this round. Although the Islamic Republic really tried to portray this to the world through its own media, that it was very flexible, that it wanted to reach an agreement with the United States. But, well, what we heard today from our meeting, and also what Barak Ravid said, that Witkoff and Kushner are really disappointed with today's negotiations, it seems that we, well, I'd say in the coming minutes, should expect, in my opinion, some noteworthy and surprising news.
Thank you, Ahmad Samadi, our correspondent at the negotiation site in Geneva, Switzerland. In the past few minutes, news from this city indicates that the talks have concluded, and the delegations are leaving the negotiations venue. Naturally, our attention is on the delegation of the Islamic Republic and the United States to see if these negotiations have yielded any results or not. Rohallah Rahimpour, journalist and political analyst from Muscat, and Jonathan Sayeh, Middle East Affairs analyst at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, joined us from our studio in Washington. Mr. Rahimpour, I'll start with you. There are whispers here and there about serious disagreements between the two sides, raised by Axios, among others. Based on what we've heard so far, do you think there's any hope for diplomacy, or will this likely be the last meeting between the parties?
Greetings to you, as well as Mr. Sayeh and our esteemed viewers. Mr. Farahzad, the very moment it was mentioned that the parties were going to take a break and consult with their capitals, meaning the Iranian team consulting with the capital of the Islamic Republic, with Tehran, that news became clear. In fact, one could speculate that the negotiations haven't yielded very favorable results, especially considering the proposals put forth by the Islamic Republic. The American team, Mr. Witkoff and Mr. Kushner, brought up other issues, or essentially insisted and pressed on the initial demands that the US had, and this, in fact, forces the Islamic Republic to retreat for the fourth step. This was a sign of that. During 3 negotiation rounds, the Islamic Republic made proposals, retreating a few steps each time. The fact that they decided to consult with the capital at this critical stage, in fact, served as an indication that they intend to make a retreat for the 4th time. This is not a favorable sign, not a useful and favorable sign for the negotiators of the Islamic Republic in these types of negotiations. And the point that Barak Ravid is raising, quoting Witkoff, meaning from Witkoff's perspective, its hopelessness aligns with what many analysts were saying. Many analysts believed that this was the last chance to prevent war. This is the ultimate peak of despair in diplomacy, where a negotiation is viewed as a last resort.
Mr. Sayeh, how do you assess this? With American demands described as maximalist and the Islamic Republic's willingness to compromise minimal, can one truly imagine the two sides reaching common ground?
Hard to imagine without seeing how Trump addresses Americans.
اینکه ما باید برگردیم ببینیم ترامپ داره با خود امریکایی‌ها چجوری صحبت می‌کنه.
Is he laying the groundwork or not? And it seems that yes. When we analyze what explanation he gave to Congress for the annual report, he referred to 3 very fundamental points regarding Iran, and he truly considered Iran the sole security issue for America. In the first point, he stated that regarding the Islamic Republic's nuclear force, Tehran has shown no flexibility whatsoever, and he used the very key term, weaponization. The first point. After that, when he was talking about missiles, when the discussion came up about whether these missiles' range reaches the US or not, he stated that yes, the Islamic Republic will soon have the capability to, in fact, pose a threat to American soil itself. Third, and most importantly of all, Trump was actually able to state at the end that yes, at least 32,000 people died. Even though we know the actual numbers are naturally higher than that estimate, he clearly said that tens of thousands were killed. And these three fundamental points are because the US, throughout history, has always used these issues, in fact, to justify an attack on a country, or in fact to, well, get involved in military matters. That's why we really need to see that if you compare America's tone now with May 2025, back then they never openly made any negative or positive statements regarding the negotiations, to the extent that Israel itself had to start a military campaign. But compare this. This is, in fact, a fundamental shift in the use of these key terms, indicating that not only is the US pessimistic, but it's also laying the domestic political groundwork for a potential attack.
Mr. Rahimpour, in the past few moments, Oman's foreign ministry has stated that the next phase of technical talks will take place in Vienna. What's your interpretation of this?
It's likely that the negotiations conducted in today's second round have focused on the fact that there are common viewpoints on technical issues, such as, for example, the method of enrichment or the dismantling of nuclear facilities, which they can evaluate. When Vienna is mentioned, there's a possibility that Mr. Grossi and the agency can have more oversight in this regard. It's possible that common technical viewpoints have emerged between the parties, and these common viewpoints must lead to an agreed framework. Look, we haven't even reached the stage of drafting the agreement text yet. So they still want to talk about technical issues with each other to reach an agreed framework. This means there's a very long way to go to reach an agreement in these negotiations, and fundamentally, the gap between the two countries' demands, capabilities, and requirements doesn't align. They keep bringing up issues, dragging things into a time-consuming process. This issue of continuing technical negotiations in Vienna can please the Islamic Republic more than anything, because it can buy more time in the interim.
Mr. Sayeh, but the mere fact that the talks, at least outwardly, don't seem to have led to a complete failure, if indeed, as the Omani side is saying, negotiations, now in a technical capacity, take place again in Vienna, doesn't this mean that both sides still see a way forward in continuing the talks?
We should remember that last year, too, it seemed like it hadn't hit a fundamental deadlock, and yet war always started. These are really sensitive security issues, and to expect them to openly, explicitly say that an agreement won't be certain and will probably go to war, it doesn't really seem like they want to push things in that direction. These issues are sensitive. That's why if we were to look at their public statements and compare them with, the actual activities happening behind the scenes, there's practically a contradiction. But the fundamental problem when we talk about technicalization, enrichment is just one part of it. Technical issues go beyond that too, considering what even the Wall Street Journal wrote. If they want to limit the talks only to enrichment, we'll again return to the issue of plutonium reprocessing and other fuels. That's why, and the third point, the discussion of inspections comes up again, and we haven't even reached these 2 points yet. The discussion is always about the core issue. It's about enrichment. If we look at this from a political angle, there are people in the Trump cabinet like Kushner and Wyckoff, and even Congress has many people who prefer diplomacy to take precedence. One point is they must satisfy these people. The second point is that they could be buying time to significantly build up their military infrastructure across the area. This would allow them to stay in better contact with regional allies, especially Israel, which makes sense if they probably want to secure permission to use Jordanian or Saudi Arabian airspace for future operations. That's why we don't really know all the data. We don't know if the reason negotiations are continuing is because they're getting closer to an agreement, or if both sides are actually just buying time. Because as much as Tehran needs to buy time, America also needs to some extent, because a fundamental attack on the Islamic Republic won't be like our previous, operations. It would have to be a major campaign. First, they'd have to destroy the missiles, and then they'd have to message the Iranian people if they want to push for regime change. And all these preparations, well, they require time.
Mr. Rahimpour, there are talks about the Islamic Republic being willing to make concessions, provided it can save face. Do you think it is likely that the Islamic Republic, under heavy American military presence, would concede there is no other choice if it truly felt collapse was imminent to significantly scale back or completely halt the nuclear program, and on other issues like missiles and such, at least buy time from the Americans and put a roadmap in front of ourselves so that in 6 months or a year we can also limit that the way the Americans want?
I agree with you, Fardad. Look, the concept of deterrence is actually defined in the Islamic Republic's national security doctrine in a way that relates to the overthrow and collapse of the Islamic Republic, unlike many countries that consider deterrence in the context of even the slightest aggression or encroachment on their soil, territory, and people. In the Islamic Republic, deterrence means regime survival, meaning the red line for the government for giving more or maximum concessions, or for surrendering. That's where the issue of overthrow comes up. Even if the Islamic Republic knows it's entering a conflict, entering a war, where at the end of it, meaning it's reassured, it's certain that it won't be overthrown, even if it remains defeated, even if its discursive hegemony is damaged, but it won't be overthrown, it will still engage in that war. Meaning, in a severe wartime situation, the regime might lose much of its nuclear arsenal, missile systems, and broader military capability. Nevertheless, it will remain in power to create a narrative of victory, claiming defiance by stating, "We didn't surrender to hand these strategic assets over to the Americans and Westerners on a silver platter. We fought, suffered losses. Therefore, as long as there's no possibility of being overthrown, the Islamic Republic will both maneuver in the diplomatic arena and, in fact, use the issue of war as a narrative for itself." All of this is so that the logic of survival in the Islamic Republic can be current, can be implemented, and can be meaningful. That logic of survival. The logic of survival requires leaders to remain in place, the organization to be intact, and the possibility of government narrative building to persist. In this regard, I agree with your viewpoint.
Mr. Sayeh, many serious opponents of the Islamic Republic argue that negotiations are futile and that it is only a matter of time before an American attack takes place. But just the fact that, Wyckoff Kushner go to Muscat, to Geneva, now probably I don't know if they'll go to Vienna or not, they negotiate with the Iranian side, and that Mr. Trump still mentions in his annual speech that diplomacy still has priority for him. Doesn't this give us the picture that, maybe with a low chance, but America doesn't think that the probability of success in diplomacy is zero?
Well, in the realm of politics, anything is possible. However, the more America and the West use diplomatic tools against Iran, the more they legitimize a future attack and military campaign. They can tell the world, tell Europe, that we made all our efforts and the Islamic Republic didn't give in. The ball was in their court and they did nothing. But if we want to go back to the issue of whether Khamenei himself is willing, or in fact the system as a whole is willing to fundamentally dismantle its nuclear program and think that this can help its survival, There are really two analyses. This point was just mentioned in the program. The second aspect is, well, didn't they learn from Gaddafi? When he dismantled his nuclear program, he no longer had any leverage, and his skies were practically open for an attack, which is exactly what happened to him. We have to keep this in mind, that now, even if they can dismantle the nuclear program to some extent, will Israel be satisfied with this or not? If there's no more leverage, well, naturally, the other, in fact, regional actors might always be sharpening their teeth for the future of the Islamic Republic. When the Islamic Republic loses cards, nothing atomic remains. How else do they want to negotiate? No one is willing to take their side. That's why if they remove that, they'll only be dependent on their missiles, to an extent that it's unclear whether, in their own opinion, this will be sufficient or not for deterring a new attack from Israel.
Thank you, gentlemen. Rohola Rahimpour, journalist and political analyst from Muscat, and Jonathan Sayeh, Middle East Affairs analyst at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in Washington. As the aircraft carrier Gerald Ford moves toward Israeli waters, Democratic leaders in the House are seeking a vote on a resolution regarding the U.S. president's war powers. This resolution requires Trump to obtain congressional approval before attacking Iran. House Democratic leaders said military action without congressional approval is unconstitutional. Marzieh Hosseini, our correspondent from the U.S. Congress, has joined us. Marzieh, now for years, Congress and the executive branch have had this kind of dispute about the extent of the president's powers for military interventions. How much chance does this plan have, at least in the House of Representatives?
Well, let me start with this point. Two things that happened in Congress today and seemed interesting to me. One involves remarks by Senate Majority Leader John Thune, while the other concerns an action taken by Senator Kaine regarding Iran. Regarding the first one, this Mr. Thune is the same person who is in that group of 8, meaning he spoke with Mr. Marco Rubio last week. We know that 2 Democrats present at the meeting, Chuck Schumer and Senator Warner, issued a warning that the issue is very serious. We hadn't heard until now what these people who were in that meeting from the Republicans were saying. This person came today and is saying that if we're going to attack the Islamic Republic, it should be for regime change. That's a very important statement from an important person. He is the majority leader and close to Trump. His use of regime change rhetoric implies a broadly stronger position from him among the Republicans. And the second point that's also being raised is that Senator Tim Kaine, 13 days ago, was supposed to bring this bill to limit Trump's war powers to prevent an attack on Iran to the floor of the U.S. Senate. And throughout these 13 days, every time reporters asked him, he would say that he was waiting to see what the outcome of the negotiations would be. I plan to introduce this bill if negotiations failed or war became likely. Today, I'm unsure if he acted because of what he heard from Mr. Rubio or the negotiations, or if it happened by chance. After 13 days, he now demands an immediate vote. Does this imply he was informed whether a military attack is actually going to happen? Meanwhile, I spoke with Senator Mullen. Let's watch this interview and then we'll be right back.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for your... First of all, I want to thank you very much for your proactive and pioneering approach. There really isn't anyone else in the media and public sphere who so openly and explicitly supports the people of Iran and their ongoing revolution. You have completely put yourself out there and stepped forward with great courage. I just have complete respect for your work, and it's clear that your listeners are showing this with their support as well. The truth is, we support the uprising of the Iranian people to take back their country and return to the Iran before the revolution in the Ayatollah's rise to power. To be honest, Iranians in the past were even more pro-Western than Americans. During the 1970s, there were more women in professional and government roles in Iran than in America. We are eager to see those days again and have relations with the Iranian people restored. But the Ayatollah is in power and is now trying to build a nuclear weapon. This cannot happen. The Ayatollah and his criminal regime have plundered Iran's wealth to support terrorism around the world. This must stop. At the same time, we are waiting for a leadership to emerge in Iran for this change to happen. No, clear, leader. We don't want a repeat of the Arab Spring, which Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama brought about, or what happened in Iraq after the US withdrawal and the rise of ISIS. We don't want a power vacuum in Iran to fuel terrorism. Therefore, we support the people of Iran in taking back their country. But our main priority is that the Ayatollah and his criminal regime do not destabilize the world and the global economy with nuclear weapons. Our focus is on this point. At the same time, we support the uprising of the Iranian people, and when a leadership emerges, we will rally around it and hope to overthrow the Ayatollah's regime forever.
Senator Mullen's statements are important because he is close to Mr. Trump. He meets with Trump almost weekly, yet coming from Oklahoma, he probably couldn't even locate Iran on a map just a few months ago. Lately, we've seen he's become extremely active on the Iran issue. He closely follows my Instagram, asks questions, takes a firm stance against the Islamic Republic, and also one last thing. Today's vote, which didn't happen, will probably go to next week, and next week his chances of getting votes are close to zero.
Thank you, my colleague, Marzia Husseini from the U.S. Congress. Arash Aramesh, a lawyer and national security expert, has also joined us from San Francisco. Mr. Aramesh, how do you view the current state of Congress and the statements we're hearing from various American lawmakers? Perhaps the most important were Chuck Schumer's remarks after he emerged from that meeting. Do you think Congress has come to the conclusion that a confrontation will probably happen sooner or later, and now they're mostly at odds with the executive branch over the mechanism of it?
It seems Congress concluded there is a risk of a military clash. The Secretary of State and CIA director typically only provide top-secret reports to the Gang of Eight when risks have escalated enough that government military or intelligence operations are highly likely. Who's the gang? The gang comprises the 8 highest-ranking, most senior legislative officials in both chambers of this country: the Speaker and the Minority Leader in the House of Representatives, the President pro tempore, and the Majority and Minority Leaders of the Senate. So that's 4 people. The chairs and ranking members of the intelligence committees of both chambers, meaning the House Intelligence Committee's Republican chair, its ranking member, or Democratic Minority Leader, and also the Senate Intelligence Committee's Republican chair and its ranking member, or Democratic Minority Leader. These 8 are the gang. Interestingly, Mr. Rubio was a member of the gang for many years, serving as chair or ranking member of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Now, this danger or this possibility of military engagement has escalated. On the one hand, negotiations with the Islamic Republic are seemingly not progressing well. I stated that the Islamic Republic must reach a point where it both bows and prostrates itself before the United States, meaning nothing less than complete surrender should be expected from the Islamic Republic. Or else, the United States will launch a military attack against it. Ignoring politics, the question is, at what point legally? I am completely in favor of a widespread attack on the Islamic Republic that would destroy or so weaken their political, military, and military-industrial positions that either the government collapses or they become irrelevant. Let's set politics aside and discuss the legal aspect. In the U.S. Constitution, the issue of using military force, as it's called, is mentioned twice. And if you look at their order, the legislator, the one who wrote the Constitution, that group of constitutional lawmakers always, their focus has been more on the powers of Congress. That's why Chapter 1 is the chapter on the powers of Congress. Chapter 2 is the chapter on the powers of the presidency and the executive branch. And Chapter 3 is the judiciary and the courts, located in Chapter 1, specifically Section 8. The lawmaker in the Constitution has given Congress the authority to declare war. Declaration of war. Well, I've written this before. The last time the United States officially declared war, it went to Congress. Congress representatives voted and officially declared war. It was at the end of World War II against Hungary, Bulgaria, and Romania. their allies at that time, Nazi Germany. So from that time until the present day, Congress has not officially declared war again. I'm saying don't confuse this with legislation authorizing military engagement. It hasn't made this specific kind of formal war declaration until now. Chapter 2 of the Constitution, which is the executive branch, its second section allows the president to use military force to defend the country, to defend against occupation, and to execute or advance foreign policy. So now we have 2 points. If Congress is the standard for declaring war and funding, what is the president's role? If the president can use armed forces and coercive powers himself, what does this first chapter say? So, they passed a law in 1973. Look, for all these years, from 1789 onwards, when the Constitution was ratified and the first president took office, until 1973, this debate was shaky and unresolved. Now, why 1973? It's the mid to late Vietnam War. The Vietnam War also lacked a formal declaration of war. The legislators convened and passed a significant measure known as the War Powers Resolution, essentially a federal law designed to regulate and oversee the use of military war powers. If we want to put it simply, if the president wants to enter a heavy military engagement or permanent deployment, he has to obtain a declaration of war, although he doesn't always get it. The Iraq War was like this, but he didn't go and get a declaration of war. He went to Congress and got an AUMF, which is an authorization for the use of military force. See this too, how much room for interpretation there always is here, legally speaking. However, if the president pursues an action strictly limited in geography, force, and duration, there is usually no need for going to Congress and declaring or getting either a declaration of war or even an authorization for the use of military force. Usually, if we want to calculate roughly, if there's going to be an engagement somewhere that lasts more than 60 days, he has to go to Congress. If it's under 60 days, he usually doesn't need to. I've explained all of this to you. The discussion is no longer legal. It is political. Those who, for example, when Mr. Obama went to attack Libya, provided air support to the Libyan revolutionaries and bombed Gaddafi's bloodthirsty regime. Not only did he not get a declaration of war from Congress, he didn't even go to get a simple vote from both houses. That's why both Democrats and Republicans have done this kind of thing. Now, in this current political alignment in the House of Representatives, where Republicans have a very fragile majority, just 1 or 2 votes more. And on the other hand, there are many Republicans who are against war. Many from Trump's extreme right-wing isolationist background are no better than these extreme leftists. They are even worse. But on the other hand, there are Democrats like Mr. Moscow, like Brad Sherman. These people in the House of Representatives were very much in favor of the United States and the president using their power and authority, both to weaken the Islamic Republic and to punish it and perhaps, hopefully, pave the way for its downfall. Because of this, I don't know, and it's hard to guess the outcome of this vote. If we want to say those who are more on that progressive, left-leaning spectrum, they are against war. Those who are on the far right and staunch supporters of Mr. Trump's movement, and also some libertarians, for example, Mr. Massey in the House of Representatives, or Mr. Rand Paul in the Senate, both are Republicans. Both are not from that MAGA spectrum, but they are from the libertarian right, meaning they say the government shouldn't interfere in these foreign affairs. These people are also among those who oppose war. Voting aside,
But Mr. Aramish, these technical arguments have persisted for a long time over every recent military confrontation between Congress and the administration. Technical arguments aside, no serious principal disagreement exists. Am I wrong? For example, if I want to use Chuck Schumer's statements as a benchmark again, we didn't really see any explicit opposition in his words, it seems. It seems that, in principle, maybe they're not against a confrontation with the Islamic Republic, although they might be against its method, its technique, its mechanism.
What's a confrontation if they just want sanctions? No, I actually think there's a serious non-partisan disagreement between factions, visible in both Republicans and Democrats. There's a faction that totally doesn't want the United States to have a dynamic foreign policy and to use the armed forces that it spends so much money on. You see, people say the same thing about our support for the war in Ukraine. Some people regarding freedom and our support for the Iranian people. My point is, don't claim support for the people of Iran. Is it a charity? No, don't even say that. This is in the national interest of the United States. Weakening missile regimes. Weakening a regime that is the world's biggest supporter of terrorism. If it has killed hundreds of American soldiers and Marines in Iraq and Afghanistan directly or indirectly by providing weapons to terrorist and militia groups operating within those wars. Hostages taking. The region's biggest mischief source. If weakening this isn't in America's interest, and if the destruction of this regime, the collapse of this regime, the annihilation of this regime isn't in the interest of the United States and its interests, then what is? We're assessing if the cost is justified. The point we're making is that if you don't do this now, 6 months from now, a year from now, the cost will be significantly higher. The Islamic Republic is weak. Now is when Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, the Houthis, and Hash al-Shabi don't have to former power. It is now proven that this paper tiger, the Islamic Republic, couldn't even shoot down an Israeli pigeon or kite in its own skies. And now is the pivotal moment when the people's internal anger is so great, caused by the widespread killing and crimes they have committed, that you can also rely on the strong support of the Iranian people. Opportunity awaits. Maybe there won't be an opportunity in 6 months or a year or 5 years ago. The issue isn't partisan. The issue is the disagreement between our group, which is mostly people both in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party who believe in using various tools and instruments for a dynamic foreign policy, and we feel and think that the presence of the United States in the world is not only positive, but also necessary, and it's in the interest of the United States and the world. And then there's another group from the extreme left who say America is totally bad and imperialist, and they make weird, self-hating remarks. And from the extreme right, there's that snobby argument that these brown and black people and whatnot aren't even worth us spending American might and force on them. Both, in my opinion, are completely bankrupt arguments, both morally and politically. Some are delusional. This was Mossad's doing, and I don't know. These are all Israel's conspiracies and ancient anti-Semitic delusions, just a big conspiracy story. But the main point is this: America is not a charity. The Islamic Republic must be punished for the massacre. But if you want the United States legislators and law enforcement to do something, tell them this is in the national interest of the United States. If you don't do this now, you'll be left with another North Korea on your hands, with nuclear weapons and an apocalyptic ideology. If you don't do it now, the Islamic Republic, with the money it wants to have, can strengthen its proxy groups again, restart nuclear and missile programs. It's time to strike them. It must be struck broadly. I'll repeat what I've often said. From the political, military, terrorist head of the regime, Khamenei himself, and the IRGC, the army, the Bashish, and the law enforcement force. Now, the Joint Staff, military commanders, IRGC bases, Basij bases. It must be such that the Islamic Republic's coercive forces and its forces of ignorance are no longer of any significance, nor a source and origin of evil, neither for inside nor for outside.
Thank you. Arash Aramesh, San Francisco jurist, security expert. With the expansion of student protest gatherings in various parts of the country, the management of many universities across Iran decided to hold classes virtually. Azad Universities of Tehran Center, Qazvin, Urmia, Azad University of Razavi Khorasan, and Alameh Tabatabai University are among these centers. According to the United Students Telegram channel, universities in Kurdistan, Zanjan, Farang, and Khwarizmi had also gone virtual before this. Observers consider this an attempt to control universities and prevent student protests. Mehdi Nahl Ahmadi, journalist and political activist, has joined us from Turin, Italy. Mr. Nahl Ahmadi, as a former student activist in Iran, in your opinion, how much can virtual classes and suspensions curb these protests as the government desires?
I offer my greetings to you, Mr. Faraz, and to our dear viewers. Look, it's highly unlikely it can contain it, but it can postpone it. Consider some of the significant impacts that the university can have on the community. The Islamic Republic currently sees itself in a security siege, facing widespread internal protests from a large segment of the people. Not much time has passed since the December massacre and the start of student protests. And also, outside its borders, there are actually threats, and these threats are not really that far-fetched to actually materialize and be implemented. It's in this situation that the Islamic Republic is looking for a series of actually short-term and immediate solutions to manage the internal threat. I mean, the massacre it carried out in December is perhaps along this path to, in the moment or in the short term, quell the internal threat and things that happen in universities, like making them virtual or actually wanting to suspend some students. Well, in the short term, it can actually have some effects. For example, making organization a bit harder or somewhat dispersing students from each other. Or actually, with these strict suspension orders, it can impose a significant individual cost on students, which might, serve to make some other students feel just a bit more cautious. But this isn't a solution. I mean, the Islamic Republic probably wants to erase or eliminate the problem statement, but the problem itself still remains. What exactly is the nature of the problem itself? In December, protests originated in the bazaar but rapidly escalated to confront the government and the leader of the Islamic Republic directly. And here, too, at the university, the issue started from actually seeking justice or showing solidarity with, students or those who lost their lives in December, but immediately reached the entire system and Ali Khamenei himself. This bug and gap emerging especially among the new generation, where students are a large part, won't be resolved with these kinds of things. I mean, the government says we're making it virtual, and then a statement is issued saying we're also going to actually boycott the virtual classes. We won't participate in the classes. This has escalated from a guild issue to a political and ideological one, making it unlikely the Islamic Republic can resolve it with these solutions.
But the government seems to have no other option now, Mr. Nahl Ahmadi. If the university space is kept open, it seems these protests could become more widespread. Despite the unprecedented massacre, students have shown they aren't afraid of government crackdowns.
Yes, the government is actually in a strange predicament. I mean, on the one hand, actually, if it continues with this situation, in the past, universities have, in a way, been the driving force of the streets. I mean, when these protests at the university became widespread, they were able to bring the streets along with them and create conditions for the protests to expand. But on the other hand, actually, given the reality of the current situation, the Islamic Republic knows that if it is going to actually aim to handle this specific issue with some leniency now, it must be careful. Look at the external threat, Mr. Farahzad. It can't handle external analysis well. Its effort is to manage these internal threats domestically, so that if that external threat wants to materialize, these threats don't pile up and create conditions where it can't manage them. That's why, perhaps, we see that very first security measure regarding society and the university among the options.
Yes. Thank you, Mehdi Nahl Ahmadi from Turin. Thank you for watching tonight's 24 program. Watch the replay later on YouTube.